Who are you?
You really have no idea, do you, Bruce?
I have a complex relationship with video game villains. On one hand, I absolutely love larger-than-life supervillains that tower over the player and make you feel insignificant. These all-encompassing monsters create a sense of awe by bending the world to their will, and going up against them gives an adventure purpose. But on the other hand, these villains can command so much attention that they make the rest of the world feel insignificant. Because if a massive demon is threatening to destroy the world, political and social issues are going to take a back seat. Megavillains like Ganon from Zelda, the Darkspawn from Dragon Age Origins, and the Sleeper from Gothic are so essential that other issues become little more than obstacles to work around while defeating the main threat. What's frustrating about this is that the world's political and social problems are usually much more interesting than the actual villain. Dragon Age Origins creates a believable society, full of history, factions, and beliefs. But the Darkspawn are nothing more than a horde of mindless zombies, with no real justification for their existence. There is certainly something to be gained from watching these different factions come together to fight a common enemy, but it often feels like the goal is to simply patch over these problems for the sake of defeating the Darkspawn, rather than actually getting to the heart of these historical struggles. Still, there are a lot of reasons to include a singular threat like this, and developers aren't stupid for doing so. It's hard to sell an engaging story if there's no focal point. Nothing tangible or immediate for the audience to pick up on and dial into. Conveying complex ideas takes time, and getting into them right away will simply overwhelm your audience. We've all been turned away from a game by a bad exposition dump. These games would be better off slowly teaching you about the world, and giving you something easy to understand to get you started. And so we have the megavillain. However, there is one game that gets away from this model, by offering a villain so unorthodox that it truly gets the best of both worlds. A simple, engaging villain that doesn't water down the experience. Of course, I'm talking about Benny from Fallout New Vegas.
Time to cash out.
From the game's opening cutscene, Benny gives the player an immediate enemy. He's a cocky, unlikable prick that steals your delivery and tries to kill you. He draws you into the game by giving you a simple narrative to chase while the game fills you in about the rest of the world. Benny tried to kill you, and now you're going to hunt him down. But along the way, you learn a whole lot about the Mojave Desert. Everyone you meet has something to say about the world's politics and factions, and you help settle issues by taking sides with different groups. This slow drip of knowledge prepares you for the real story, the complex political struggle at the heart of Fallout New Vegas. Today, I want to take you through the way Benny introduces us to the Mojave Desert. We'll start at the beginning of the game and examine a new player's typical experience, all the way through the game's first act. We'll see how the developers use Benny to craft an engaging introduction, to introduce you to one of the most believable worlds in all of video games. The first thing a new player sees is a video about the main factions and conflicts in the Mojave. This is your classic exposition dump, and something that games are a bit too comfortable using. While this little explanation makes sense to someone familiar with the game, this is a lot of information for a new player to retain. If the game wants to keep players interested, it's going to have to give them something a bit more memorable. And so, we're introduced to Benny. Benny has unusually well-kept hair, and wears a distinctive checkered suit. He looks out of place next to the muscular mercenaries digging your grave, and quickly quiets them before speaking to you directly.
From where you're kneeling must seem like an 18-carat run of bad luck. Truth is, the game was rigged from the start.
He shoots you, and the game cuts to the title sequence. This is one of the most memorable moments in Fallout New Vegas. It puts the man in the checkered suit front and center in your mind, and gives you a villain that you want to see taken down. We wake up in Good Springs, saved by a man named Doc Mitchell and a strange robot named Victor. The doc checks out our vitals and gives us some gear to help us on our way. We ask about the man in the checkered suit, and he suggests we talk to the locals. Good Springs is a small, quiet town, but it had some problems with a group called the Powder Gangers.
I'm going to get my friends and we're burning this town to the ground.
And if we'd like, we can choose to take sides. We ask around about the man in the checkered suit and learn that he's headed south towards Prim. so we gather our meager belongings and hit the road. As we enter Prim, one thing becomes clear. The town is in absolute chaos. Escaped convicts have taken over the area, and very few locations are still safe. Stationed near the road is an NCR unit. The NCR is one of the 3 main factions in the game, and this is our first introduction to them. We learn that their unit is massively understaffed and unable to keep the city under control. The NCR is attempting to annex the Mojave Desert, but is spread too thin to do so effectively. They simply don't have the soldiers to keep the roads and towns safe, and this will be a major issue throughout the game.
Patrolling the Mojave almost makes you wish for a nuclear winter.
In order to stay on Benny's trail, we need to get some information from the locals. The deputy sheriff has been captured by the escaped convicts, and the player has to rescue him or steal his journal to learn Benny's next move. Benny is on his way to a town called Novak, so it's time to hit the road once again. The road to Novak takes us through a town called Nipton, and this is where we're introduced to the Legion. The Legion is the second main faction in the game, and here we get a visceral yet honest introduction. The citizens of Nipton have been rounded up and slaughtered. Some still hang from crucifixes, but most have been burned in the center of town. A bit further on, we meet Volpes Inculta, the legionary in charge of this atrocity.
Don't worry. I won't have you lashed to a cross like the rest of these degenerates.
He says that the townsfolk were burned for their corruption, and that you should tell everyone you meet about the Legion's wrath. This violent incident tells us everything we need to know about the Legion. They're a genocidal, militaristic nation with no regard for human life. They intend to conquer the Mojave through sheer force, and if they do, the results will be catastrophic. Shaking off that traumatizing experience, we make our way towards Novak. This is another small town similar to Goodsprings. Speaking to the owner of the motel, we learned that Benny did come through here, and that he was a real jerk. One of the town's snipers knew the men he was with, and so we ask him about Benny's plans. He agrees to tell us if we do him a favor, and this takes us on a quest to clear the RepCon test site. This quest introduces us to 2 of Fallout's marginalized communities, the Ghouls and the Nightkin. Both groups are sick of being mistreated, and have plans to forge a new life for themselves. This group of ghouls has taken up faith with a cult leader named Jason Bright, who promises them a new life on another planet. The Nightkin have adapted old stealth technology to become invisible, and move through the world unnoticed by humans. These 2 groups introduce us to some of the game's social issues. Bigotry and prejudice are still common, and so these 2 groups are carving out new paths for themselves. After this quest, our sniper informant lets us know that Benny was headed north to Boulder City, and so we follow him there. Here, we have another run-in with the NCR, who are in a standoff with the men Benny was traveling with. These men are part of a gang called the Khans, and we learn about their relationship with the NCR. We can choose to either make a deal to get the Khans out,
I can't believe I'm doing this. But alright, the hostages can go.
or kill them.
Say hello to my little friend!
But either way, we learn what we need to finally track Benny down. Benny is part of a group called the Chairman, and one of the executives at the Tops Casino in New Vegas. It's finally time to go to the big city. As we approach New Vegas, it becomes clear that we won't be able to simply waltz into the Tops. There's a giant wall surrounding the strip, and no way to get around it. We're going to have to explore the rest of the city to find the main entrance. Wandering around the city, we discover that the neighborhoods surrounding the strip are incredibly poor. Children scour for food, and people with nowhere to turn rob unsuspecting travelers. Drug dealers peddle their destructive treats, and bodyguards offer to escort you for a price. This area is dangerous, but not in the way that Prim or Nipton are. These neighborhoods weren't recently invaded by a band of convicts or the Legion. This is just the way things are, and have been for years, maybe even decades. It's the result of economic neglect, from a city that takes and takes without ever giving anything back. As we make our way towards the strip, we're stopped by a man named Old Ben, who warns us not to walk past the greeter without permission. Of course, this greeter isn't human. He's a massive, heavily armed robot, just like the one who rescued us, and he's guarding the entrance to the strip with a few buddies. We see a man attempt to run past the guards, and as you might expect, he gets gunned down. This is our introduction to the third and final main faction, Mr. House and his army of Securitron robots. As we can see, this faction is dedicated to the New Vegas Strip above all else. It maintains a state of economic segregation with its massive wall and airtight security, and couldn't really care less if the rest of the city starves. As we approach the greeter, we are informed that we'll need to be approved before we enter. We can either do this with an incredible sum of money or an official passport. Assuming we don't have the money, we can get a passport by doing some shady favors for the local businesses, at which point we'll be able to enter the strip. Now we're finally ready to confront Benny. But before we do, let's take a look back at our adventure thus far. We started the game knowing very little about the world of Fallout New Vegas. There was a brief explanation about the three main factions, and then a guy in a checkered suit shot us in the head. All we had to go on was anger and revenge. Someone wronged us, and we were going to set things straight. But now things have changed. We've seen a lot of the world, and met a lot of the people that live in it. We've seen the NCR struggle to secure Prim, and stand off with the cons at Boulder City. We've seen the Legion ruthlessly massacre Nipton, and threaten that this will happen again. We've seen the quiet towns of Goodsprings and Novak, and met the ghouls and the Nightkin. We've seen the economic devastation of the greater New Vegas area, and the security measures that House uses to keep the strip isolated. We know a lot about the Mojave Desert, and Benny no longer seems like the only interesting character. This is when a lot of games make the mistake of doubling down on the original villain. Just when you're starting to get invested in the game's politics, the main threat comes roaring back, demanding your full, undivided attention. But Benny isn't your average villain, and our coming encounter will only draw us deeper into the game's world. As we enter the strip, we are greeted by Victor,
Howdy, partner.
the robot who saved us back in Goodsprings. He invites us into the Lucky 38 to meet Mr. House, and we can either accept or reject this invitation. If we choose to meet with Mr. House, he'll chat for a bit before asking us to retrieve his delivery from Benny. All roads point to the eventual confrontation with the man in the checkered suit, and so we walk down the strip and into the Tops.
Hey, fella, welcome to the Tops Hotel and Casino.
There are a lot of different ways our encounter with Benny can go. We can carefully pile evidence against him, escort him up to the 13th floor, flirt with him, attack him directly, or attempt to assassinate him.
Huh? Oh!
They all play out differently and give us different perspectives, but the fundamental concepts remain the same. A first-time player is unlikely to find some of the more unusual options, so we'll focus on a fairly straightforward path. As we explore the Tops, we run into the Ben Man himself, who is understandably surprised to see us. We can ask him what's going on, but he's hesitant to talk out in the open, and suggests that we meet in the suite on the 13th floor. Benny is surrounded by bodyguards, and we're just one lone courier, so we agree to his conditions. But when we get there, Benny is nowhere to be seen, and he sends his bodyguards up to assassinate us. As the mythically strong courier, we're able to kill off the bodyguards and survive yet another assassination attempt. Collecting ourselves, we make our way out of the Tops, and are approached by a man named Volpe Zinculta. He is from the Legion, and invites us to come to their camp to meet Caesar. Most importantly, he informs us that Benny has fled the strip, and is headed towards their camp as we speak. Entering the Legion headquarters, we once again come face to face with Benny. However, this time, he's in handcuffs. After talking to Caesar, we finally get a chance to talk to him, and he opens up about everything. He tells us about the history of the chairman, and his plan to usurp Mr. House as the ruler of New Vegas. Benny realizes he's done for, so he encourages the courier to take over his work, using the Platinum chip to take over New Vegas. This introduces us to the final main quest option, where the player can operate independently of the three main factions, continue Benny's plan, and secure an independent New Vegas. We have now been introduced to all four of the main quest options: siding with the NCR, siding with the Legion, siding with House, and working for an independent New Vegas. The player now knows everything they need to move ahead with the game's story. They have an understanding of the world's politics, future, and issues. Our introductory villain is no longer needed, and this is why in every single encounter, Benny either dies or is run out of the Mojave, never to be seen again.
So I hear the honcho of one of them strip families up and disappeared. Poof! Yeah, they'll find his body someday.
In our playthrough, Caesar asks us to destroy a bunker holding House's technology. Here, we can either use the Platinum chip to upgrade the Securitrons, or destroy the station altogether. Either way, Caesar hears a rumble, thinks we've destroyed it, and has us kill Benny. Benny exits the stage for the final time, unshackling the game's narrative from a simple story of revenge. Chasing down Benny has been fun, and it's taught us a lot about the world, but it's also been relatively shallow. A simple, unambiguous hunt where the next move was always obvious. So many games never get out from under this, and follow a monolithic evil from beginning to end. You could argue that the game simply places this burden on the Legion, and that they become the big bad monster that drives the game forward. But after Benny's death, I never felt like I was simply trying to defeat the Legion. I was trying to decide the fate of the Mojave, and defeating the Legion was just a single piece of the equation. The world created by Fallout New Vegas is incredibly complex, and there are no perfect answers or simple solutions. Debates rage on as to the best outcome for this imaginary land, but we were all introduced to it by the man in the checkered suit.
Make Vegas a town I would have been proud of, baby. Let it swing.
Thanks for watching.